We are live.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us for a new webinar here at Mix of the Masters. A lot of familiar names who've joined us today. And obviously, we have a very, very special guest today. The amazing mixer, producer, Michael Brauer is here with us. How are you, Michael? Thanks for doing this.
Thank you. I'm doing great. It's a pleasure to be here.
We're really excited to have you. A lot of questions already in the chat. A lot of people join and more questions to come. I think we should get started.
All right. Welcome, everybody. I see some old friends here. I see Edu, see Jimmy, Daniel, Lee. I mean, there's just, there's a lot of people here that I recognize. So let's get going. Hope all of you are feeling okay and surviving this period. It's certainly, you know, it's a new experience. It's one you'll be able to recall, and hopefully with good memories. You know, this was the time to take advantage of having a lot of time on your hands and maybe changing the pattern of how you think, of how you approach music or how you approach your mix. For me, it was that. I mean, I was very fortunate. I'm here. This is not fake. This is actually real. These are CDs. I don't know if some of you really know what that is. You know, it's one of these little square things. Oh, but you know, I was fortunate because I had a place that I spent many years, you know, saving to try and have a place away from the city. And that's where I came to for obviously for safety. And I also brought my my rig up, and it was strictly, actually it was my assistant's rig where it's all in the box. I brought that up here and I took over my kid's den. And amazingly, it always sounded good down there. I mean, just, you know, I listen to music occasionally, but never anything seriously. But when I brought my stuff down there and I set up the desk, and I had a few S1s that I put together, because as most of you know, I still like moving faders. And it sounded great. And so I took advantage of this situation to really learn more about mixing in the box, because as all of you know, it's not about the gear. It's about the pilot. It's about who's driving this. And, you know, a crappy mix is a crappy mix. And it can be on the greatest console with the greatest equipment. And it's a crap mix, or it can be a really good mix. And when it's a good mix, nobody cares where it came from, how you got it, whether it was in your laptop or on your phone, you know, or expensive equipment or little equipment. And so this was an opportunity for me to learn, in a sense, a new instrument, because, you know, when you say it doesn't matter, you still have to learn it to the point where you don't have to think about it anymore. And for me, I'd been working on setting up my template for a couple of years, but I never took it too seriously because I had all my analog gear and I had everything else that I could always, you know, rely on. And many of you know that the transition from having completely being analog with an SSL desk and then removing that part of the whole analog chain and replacing it with a control surface that basically looked like a console, the Avid S6. I learned how to do that. This didn't happen overnight. And by the time I moved to my new studio, it felt great. I knew the sweet spot, it felt good. And this next transition wasn't quite as scary, because now I just had to replace my main multi-bus approach and with software. So I had plenty of time here, you know, and I really got into it. I've been really enjoying it. And my room, it's actually sounds really good. I mean, I would send a mix out, and nobody was commenting that there was no bass or it was too much bass. So I was very lucky. It was very fortunate, which, I think there was a question about, um, what do you, wow, there are a lot of questions here. um, oh, here it is. Actually, it's the first question from Shane. Um, could you supply some advice for those of us working in rooms that aren't optimal? I'm spending a lot of time referencing and currently looking into Trinov ST2. Well, you've already answered part of it. Is if it's not optimal, and let's just, there's two parts to this. Is it a room that's transient where you're only going to be there for a little while, or is it a room really you're going to be settling in now for 6 months or a year? If that's the case, you want to find somebody who can come in and scope the room out and maybe use DSP, across the speakers, which was in my case when I moved to my new room. The room was good, but it really needed some help, and without having to redo the walls and some other things. I had Dave Koch come in, and he scoped it out, and he got me some DSPs, very, very good, very transparent. And I loved the room at that point. It wasn't drastic stuff, but it was enough that it's irritating, if the bottom end isn't quite right. Using references obviously is important, but um, I think in a case like that where really you're not sure where the top end is correct or the bottom end is correct, get yourself some really, really good headphones, or some in-ears. Um, I have for in-ears, I've got the Audio 64s, and for the headphones, they're Audio Ease that Manny turned me on to, and that really works. And when I first came to my room downstairs, I was using those all the time, and I was like just making sure that what I heard, that I know, and then when I take them off, I go, this seems really, really close. So I mean, ideally you try to get your room correct, especially the bottom end. And sometimes it can be just a matter of purchasing some acoustical treatment that isn't too expensive, maybe some tubes or whatever you can do just to get through this. But it's ongoing, and whether it's a big room or a small room, we all go through that, and it's scary. It's definitely scary. So you're suggesting that, doing a lot of referencing, that's good. And maybe, try different speakers, because one set of speakers may just simply not work for that room. So mostly I'm struggling with balances, finalizing my EQ work with confidence. Well, if that's because of the room, then you want to improve the sound of the room or get yourself headphones. If it's anything else, that just comes with time, right? Just hundreds and hundreds of hours of what works, what doesn't work. Take it outside the room, and listen to it somewhere else. I brought my little radio that I have, my little boom box, and I play everything through that. And when it sounds good on that, because I know that reference, then I'm going to trust that this mix is really, really close. And then I'll send it off, and I'll wait for the client or the artist to comment. Let's see. Daniel. Hey, Daniel. Are there any special tricks you do with reverb or delays that could help us achieve more space in a mix? How to get them to be felt but not distinctly heard? It's interesting you say that. I get so intimidated by people who have these tricks where they have one special reverb that goes into another reverb that is delayed and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, it scares me. And I'm like, wow, how did you come up with that stuff? Wow, that must be an incredible sound. I was like, okay, I'm guilty of having a system that is very complicated. It's complicated. The engine is complicated, but the driving is very, very simple. But having said that, I don't have any tricks. And when you're saying, a reverb that isn't heard, well, generally that means the darker the reverb, the less you're going to hear it, and the more you're going to feel it. So choosing combinations of reverbs, I, I've never had one going into another, but what I do have is I have a selection of everything from a short ambient, so it feels like, if I played a guitar or a vocal through this, it would sound like there's a room. And then I have something that's a little bit longer. Maybe it's a short plate with some brightness to it. And then I might have a chamber. I might have a hall, right? So I have all these different environments that I can create depending on the song and what's appropriate. And it's right there, right at my fingertip. I have a lot of sends. We all have sends. And I try one, I don't like it, try another one. I add a little, maybe it's good, Daniel, but I'm hearing it. So I back off a little bit. And maybe it just sounds like it's going into the reverb. It just sounds like there's reverb on it. And what I've been doing forever is that I put a pre-delay into my reverb. So it's like, which that particular delay, I think that was about 125, 127. And that's kind of the sound of what the old analog tape across the heads, the distance between that, because we used to originally send the signal to the tape and then off the tape into the reverb. And then what we used to do also is we would mult it. So if you pan to the left, it went directly to the reverb. If you pan to the right, it then went into the tape delay and into the reverb. And then if you put it down the middle, you got a little bit of both, It was great. And that was it. I mean, for those first 10 years, mixing Luther and Aretha, I had two EMT plates, 140s. One was short and the other one was long and had that stereo. That was it. Just two plates until the Lexicon 224 came out. And then I started using that. But back then it was very, very simple. You just did the best that you could. Let's see. What was your mixing philosophy at the beginning of your engineering career? Any words of wisdom for the home studio engineers out there? Well, we're all home studio engineers right now. So I guess we're all talking to each other. The mixing philosophy, I never thought of mixing any more than I was thinking of engineering. But I will tell you an interesting little story about that is that I was in a band. I was in a cover band, so there was nothing really to hold on to. But when I decided that wasn't the life for me, what I missed terribly was the feeling of performing in front of an audience. When the band was tight, it was just about second to none when it comes to that feeling of that energy you get from an audience. And I didn't want to lose that. So I guess if it's called a philosophy, my philosophy was that when I started, I would engineer, I would record what I would mix, but I found that I couldn't wait to mix what had been recorded. I was finding a lot more joy in that, even though I love the recording process, but I really looked forward to the end because I could then perform. And what I mean is that I wanted to be back on stage. So in my mind, I always imagined that I was actually performing live, that the console was just another instrument and a much easier one, the drums. I only had two hands. I didn't have to have my feet going. And I could stand up and I could move. And, you've obviously seen many videos where I have quite the move. I can't stand to look at those, but I don't care. I'm performing and I'm not putting on an act. In my mind, I want to be performing. And so those early records you hear where things are crescendoing, all of those, that was all manual. There's no automation. I felt so good when I could be mixing and performing. I had the best of both worlds, right? I didn't have to depend on a band. I didn't have to depend on anything. It was all in my head now, and to me, I was a much better and more comfortable at mixing than playing drums. But yet now in my mind, I still had that energy, that love for performing, which I've never lost. It's been part of me. So that philosophy, and I think, and I didn't really analyze this because one should never analyze anything you're doing. But when I started teaching mix with the masters, I had to actually verbalize why and what's going on in my head, which mixers never do. We never talk about stuff. It's quiet. And I guess what happens is that the action of performing means that I'm not analyzing the balances and the sounds and spending time on the kick and spending time in a vacuum and soloing. I never soloed. The only time I soloed is if there was a problem. I'm trying to figure out what the problem is, right? That's when I soloed. And so at the earliest stage of my mixing career, I was just in it for the fun, for the joy of hearing this song. And as the artist became more and more famous, it became even more exciting because I got to hear the song before you got to hear the song. I got to be there, and it was that much more exciting. So I realized by teaching this, Mix with the Masters seminar, that a lot of people didn't think that way. And I would watch them; they would be struggling and they'd be thinking, and I was like, "Why are you thinking? There shouldn't be. I mean, you should let your mind go, but it shouldn't be trying to analyze. You should just let it go. Just whatever comes to you, react to what is the music, not questioning what should be going on. Just feel it. It's music." And I think many of you forget it's just music, and you just turn buttons until something feels good, and you have to depend on that instinct. Well, how do I know it's right or wrong? Well, you got plenty of time. Just keep working at it. And when people go, "Wow, that's a great idea," that's usually an indicator that that idea was good. And when they go, "What were you thinking?" then you go, "Okay, well, maybe I'll change that idea." Who cares? I mean, what's the worst they're going to say? "I don't like the idea." What's the best they're going to say? "You're a genius," right? You shouldn't have any fear about letting the ideas flow. Just go for it, go crazy, and then you can back off a little bit. So I guess that was my philosophy, is just don't think so much. Twin Shadows, Stephen, particularly your approach to mixing synth drummed machine dominant music and use of effects to create a sound that feels simultaneously old and new. Well, you got to give most of that credit to George, because the record was recorded that way, and that record was chaos, right? And he was very concerned that I might clean up his chaos, and I was like, "I don't want to clean it up. I just want to focus it." So that at least the chaos you have, you're at least being held by the hand of where to get through the maze of this craziness going on. And that's what I achieved. But that's an interesting record, because I would go out of my way to try things I had never tried before. I mean, to the point where I think I've told this story a couple of times where I wanted to go in and do the reverse of everything I normally would do in a mix. More kick? No, less kick. Brighter snare? No, duller snare. You know, the balance of more lead vocal than backing vocals? No, the other way. It was nuts. And I actually started, I say, well, how do I do everything in reverse? And I was thinking, I better start in the morning and figure out how to do this. From the time I woke up in the morning, instead of getting out of bed on that side of the bed, I got out of the other bed. And then, you know, instead of brushing my teeth with my right hand, I brush it with my left. And I started to understand, because this is my go-to. This is not my go-to. And then in the brushing, if you brush on the top, no, that's my go-to. So I reversed, I kept saying, no, that's a go-to. Got to change it, got to change it, got to change it, to the point of, you know, how I left. And instead of taking the elevator, I took the stairs. And instead of getting on the subway at the front, I got the subway at the back, you know. So by the time I got to the studio, I was like, okay, I think I got a handle on how to catch myself from the go-to. And I sat down, you know, I got in, I told my assistant, all right, this is going to be a crazy day, man. I'm going to do everything in reverse and we'll see what happens. And that's what I did. What was the song? I don't remember the song. I have to find out. I got to look at it someday. But I started mixing, and by that time I felt comfortable. And so I'm mixing along, and, you know, and it's like, oh, you know, instead of bright, it's dark, and darker bright, you know, and I'm done. I'm like, this is a crazy ass mix, man. It feels, and how lucky am I that the actual song, obviously, you know, wanted this kind of an approach. I mean, you know, how did I wake up in the morning and say, this is what I'm going to do with this song? I hadn't even heard the song. And I walked in and it was appropriate. Obviously, if it was totally inappropriate, it probably would have, well, who knows what it turned out? You know, there are no rules. But this one needed something crazy, and that was the approach. And when he walked in, he listened to it, and I just had this smile on my face. Like, he's gonna really, really hate it, or he's gonna really, really like it. There's not gonna be anything in between here. And I'm gonna have to be, you know, prepared to just put all the faders down and start again, right? Because it's an experiment. And with experiments, you can completely disregard, right? Because it's just an experiment. That's, you know, you have total license to accept it or not. And he listened to it. When he was done, he was like, he looked at me and he goes, how did you do this? It's like, it's really great. It's just so different. So we tweaked a couple of things and the mix was done. You know, trust me, I don't do that every day. I only did that once, and that was enough. But it worked. And that's what I'm saying. It's like, inspire yourself. Like, go try things that don't be afraid of trying really stupid stuff. Maybe it's not so stupid, you know, just inspire yourself, because, you know, for some of you who have been mixing forever and you're just so tired of it, and it's like you go through the same thing. That's not what you started this business for. You did it because the music brought you joy. And if you're losing that joy, find something inside you to excite yourself again, right? I mean, do it, or get out, you know, and be happy doing something else. What are some of your favorite artists, Daniel asked, that you mixed recently? Well, they're new artists, because for the past 3 or 4 months, that's all I've been doing. And there's some great people. Well, I mean, this one, we're just finishing up his record, is Mark Scabilia. There's a James Kelly that I did. There's this guy, Arthur Bod, just cool stuff. You know, and I'm not looking, you know, like, the question is, who am I liking, you know, and that's who I'm liking. And I'm doing one also from Brazil. And you know, it's just it's been a lot of fun. Yeah, so those are just a few of the most recent ones who hopefully you'll hear one day. But if not, um, check them out anyway. You're gonna, I think you'll really like it. Do you ever change a high frequency drivers on the monitors due to wear? Absolutely. When with my ProAx, either once or twice a year, I would change the tweeters, because they get tired. They absolutely get tired. And then as far as the drivers, I would keep the drivers until I started hearing a bass buzz. And then I knew that it was getting frayed. But the tweeters, I think it's really good to change once or twice, depending how much use you're getting out of them. It's a good question, and I do that. Lester. Let's see. Whoa, 20 more questions. Hey, Edu. Hi, we'll see. Yes, I'm sure there's a question somewhere on there. Ever think of doing an online assistant setup through your first mix live? No talking or interruptions, just session audio. Yeah, I might do that. Why not? Watching through the whole process. It's something I'll think about. But I'm gonna have to verbalize as I'm mixing, I think. Otherwise, I think it would be too difficult, but I'll think about it. Maybe I'll call you, maybe you have some ideas. Oh, I see. So there was a question before and I didn't quite know what it is, but he was talking about, okay, so the question is, I'm gonna run back here. When you do parallel processing on your drums with the EMI, does the EMI go directly to the LF mix? I'm not sending to the EMI. I'm putting, and first of all, we're talking about the EMI plugin. It's like a mastering plugin, which is, it eats a lot of space. But I'll put that across my room and then I'll print it because it's just, it's a pig when it comes to how much CPU. So I put it across, it's on an insert, and then I get the sound I like, get it really exciting, then print it, and then I gain some time back. Let's see. Now the question is, could you please elaborate a bit if you found any compressor plugins that have Mojo, like your AWA, the Federal, or the VacuVox? Do you use your Roger Mayer still? The Roger Mayer, I just recently had it recal because it was just not sounding good. And I think some parts replaced because it was old. And I had a guy there who knew it well. He had the schematics and calibration. And so I use that. I'll use that sometimes across the acoustic guitars, which is crazy. And unfortunately, I had to stop using it because one side it had some artifacts in it. It was noisy, so I stopped using it. But now that it's fixed, I'll be using that again. I haven't found anything. Well, there is a Federal plugin, but we had to do a lot of stuff afterwards to make it, it's not just a Federal plugin, it's a few other things on the other end of it, because my particular one is just a very unique sounding Federal, because it had been modified by 2 or 3 different techs, head of Sony, and then my guy Vince Gutman, and one other person. So it was always getting more and more amazing. So I haven't found anything like that. I haven't found anything even close to my AWAs. Um, I started having that. I had one company starting to look at that, and they went screaming into the night because there's so many artifacts. It's so complicated uh, that they don't know where to start to try to model it. It's a tough one. But the green AWA I'm referring to, and that's the one that I used a lot on the Chris Martin's vocals and stuff. So no, I haven't found anything yet. But the Presto, um, you know, True Iron, Presto, yeah, they've done a great job on. Let's see. I was just thinking. In fact, it was Devin Powers, and I'm just looking to see what the name. Well, you'll know what it is. It's a Powers group. Anyway, that's about the only one. And then, but there's a Plugin Alliance, the black box. I've been using that lately. That is so cool. And of course, the 9000. I've been waiting for years for that because look, it's not like I didn't like the SSL when I left it. I mean, I love the sound of that SSL. I love the sound of the 9000. Nobody was doing a 9000. Everybody was doing a 4000. And trust me, the 9000 sounded great. And I preferred it over the 4000 to some certain degrees. I love the brown. I love the bottom end, the brown, button that you can, alternate button you can hit on there. I like that sound. But the mid-range, low mid-frequency on the 9000 on guitars, I mean, all those presets you see on the 9000 plugin, those are all mine. And all my guitar sounds, I did a lot of presets for you, especially that 4K. It's really, really cool. So obviously I love Plugin Alliance, and of course I love Waves. I mean, there's so many cool things, so many great plugins coming from Waves that I use. The J37 I use all the time. I have like a set of favorites, and they're just, those are my go-tos first. Obviously the Brauer Motion plugin, that's a fantastic plugin. And I'm actually designing a new one that's going to be incredible. I'm designing this with Dweezil. So that guy is a genius. It's gonna be a fun one. I'm not going to tell you exactly what it is yet. You'll know it when it gets out. It's going to be within the next 5 months. And who else? I mean, Sound Toys. Yeah, look, I have go-tos. PSP. I use the Vintage Warmer a lot, or I use they got a new one called Infinite Strip, which is really cool. You should all check it out. Maybe what I'll do is I'll send them a bunch of my presets that I'm starting to make. The good thing is when you're trying to get a sound and you like it, you should just immediately save it and say, snare punchy or snare tubby or, guitar bright, and just keep saving them so that when another song comes along and you're saying, oh, I really wish I had, you've got that plugin, boom, you got to, it's right there in your savings. How do I pick reverbs and delays, stereo or mono, and how to pick which tracks get their own effects versus sharing with other tracks? Mr. Burns, now there's a funny man. I think I laughed for 7 days straight with him. Good to see you via chat. I said this earlier. I want a nice range of reverbs. I don't have to dig. But at the beginning of an album, if it's a kind of song where you tend to want to have reverbs that aren't heard, so I'm going to start selecting darker reverbs and warmer, less aggressive kind of sounds. And even my delays won't have a lot of brightness. Maybe they'll have, they'll have more darkness. And lately, I've been able to, again, being up here for, a few months, I've really, really gotten close into the different types of delays that I really like. And one of them is the Benson. All these are plugins, the Benson plugin. I've been using that a lot, and I'm slowly I have to at some point sit down and compare it to my Benson. And once I do that, I'll have some really great presets, which I'm sure they'll be happy to share. But Echo Farm, Echo Farm tends to be maybe a mono, and I have different delay times, right? So I'll start off with maybe, and the Ampex. I've been using the Ampex from UAD, right? With just a slap, maybe 114 on the left and maybe 125 on the right, right? And then when you send the vocal to that, it just opens up, and then the more slap you have, the more it starts to sound punky, and it's great. So I'll have something short like that. And then maybe with the Echo Farm, I have different types, but it'll be really, really short, more like a small type of reflection, right? And so almost up to 90 milliseconds, so you have that almost like that Elvis slap, but very, very short. And then it starts to get longer. And then I have one delay, which I actually I send it to my Brauer Motion, and it's eighth notes or something, and so even though it's a mono, obviously it's going back and forth, and I make it subtle enough. And so there's movement. As you all know, I'm big on movement. And if I don't have to actually do it physically, I prefer it's done automatically. And so that's one idea, where you take a mono signal and then you just have it, move. And then I have the EC300. Oh boy, who is that? That delay. Well, I'm sure if you look up, when you type in EC300, you'll find it. I love that delay. And what I do with that, and that's a really cool plugin, because there's like 4 or 5, 6 different type of machines within it. And and you can go from an analog to metallic to hybrids to tape, and you'll have one setting you like, and then you just pop in different ones, and it's still the numbers are the same, but now the tone changes. And then you have a selection. You want that particular box to be brighter, and then there's endless toys with that. And so that goes stereo, and I'll do that. I'll take a lot of top end off that, and that'll be like a quarter note. And so if I want to hold out a note, and it's all sending to this stuff at the same time, the faders are down. So at any point I want to hear an idea, I just put a fader up, because the stuff is sending. I don't have to think about setting it up and doing. And that's the whole point of mixing, is you don't want to stop thinking about where you're going. You just, if you have everything going everywhere that you need, like I have all my delays, all I got to do is just try this idea. I don't like it. Oh, I like it, but it needs to be faster. Okay, open it up, make it faster. It's got to be darker. But there isn't like this. What should I? There's no time for that. I'm just moving buttons until it feels good. So, so I have that. And then that's about it. And I have the H delay too. And the difference between the 300 and the H delay might be just because of one is just, I might do a triplet, quarter triplet, and the other one is a regular quarter. And just that little difference, you start, the song feels like there's more of an upbeat. And so these delays are going, ma, ma. So, they're all there for me to play with, and I like them or I don't like them. I use them or I don't use them, but they're there. Instead of taking the time to set it all up. could you tell us, this is from Powell, can you tell us about mixing choruses, hooks, and making them explode or creating more emotional impact using width, space, bandwidth, volume? Yeah. Well, as we all know, if we're doing pop music, it's all about the hook. And there's so many options in front of you, and it depends on the arrangement. If the arrangement is exactly the same from intro to verse to B section to chorus, and the only thing that changes is the bridge, and the arrangement isn't, the instrumentation is the same, what are you going to do? Because you don't want it to, it's just going to sound kind of dull, so in a situation like that, I tend to make the verse tight. I'll bring the stereo in on the guitars or whatever the main instrument is. And then maybe the bottom end. I won't put in so much bottom end on the kick and on the bass. I'll mult the bass out. So I've got, one with a body, one with the neck, and I'll bring the body down in level. And so it sounds like a good mix. I mean, it's not like, oh, it's bass shy or it's mono or anything. It feels good. But then when the chorus comes in, everything opens up. The bottom end comes in, and then the brightness, I'll add brightness. So in a situation where you're challenged by the arrangement, use sonics, use movement, use placement. And then, the hook should be simple. So, take what sounds like the hook and just throw it in your face and make it really obvious so that it's simple to follow. Sometimes there's too many instruments playing the melody and it's just blurred. So remove some of it. Try to keep the melody as simple as possible so there isn't so much stuff going on. I mean, I think Sweden used to say this a long time ago. It's like, there should never be more than 3 elements coming at you at any time. And especially with a good hook, you don't want 5 things coming at you. You just want the hook. So, presenting that, there are times too where I go to the fader, and up until the chorus, maybe I'll have the song down about 1.5 dB. And then when the chorus comes in, I ramp it up to 0. And then I bring it back down for the next verse, maybe not as much. So there's a lot of things you can do to help bring more impact to that chorus. And sometimes, being in the box, I would introduce a new compressor. I'm not trying to make things smaller. I'm just trying to make things wider and punchier. And it'll just be for the choruses, and I automate it in and out. And generally they don't click. It depends. If one clicks, then you do it a different way. You, instead of bypass, you go with a power, or you do something so it doesn't sound obvious. And like there are times where I'll use the Shadow Hill. There's 2 different ones that are offered that Plug-in Alliance does, and I'll choose the one that has the width options and a few other things in there. And then sometimes on some courses, I'll pop that in. It's subtle, but that's all you need to be. And it just takes the chorus that already sounds good and just pop. So just that little movement helps, and then I come out. If you're the point of this is not to compress it anymore. The point of it is to make it explode more. So be careful, just pay attention to what you're doing, and keep working, tweaking it until, you go in and out. And when your eyes are closed and you pop it in, you should feel it. Everything I'm talking about is how you can bring more emotion to a song, which in turn brings more emotion to the listener, right? This is all this is about. This is not about technique. I don't give a rat's ass about technique. I mean, I've learned how to do the technique to execute my ideas, right? But it's not the other way around. It's not like if I use this really cool technique, it's going to sound good. Why? What's it in reference to? It's the technique itself means nothing. It's your idea and your creativity that you want to feel a certain way. And so you just play until it feels good. And if it doesn't feel good, then you turn it off. Oh yeah, here it is. Betty, Audi's LCDX headphones you're talking about. Thank you very much. That's what it is. Audi's LCDX. I love those headphones. All right, let's see. Let's see. How do you deal with printing stems completely in the box? Is there a good method to printing stems to add up completely when an instrument is not hitting the compressor? Is there a good method to printing stems? You know what? You probably write Fernando. He'll tell you. I don't think we do anything special because we're using the side chain link so that every stem thinks it's going through the compressor. There's an answer for you. And if I'm wrong, go blame Fernando. He knows everything. A question about DACs, DACs, how you choose yours, what you recommend for choosing one you can't test before, and what you think about Crane Song Solaris. I don't know. Sorry to to ask this question and then I don't know, but I just don't know. Sorry. I think Crane Song is, I've heard great things about it. You know, I've been using Antelope and I love Antelope. So, you know, I think you definitely need to be trying it before you buy it. Because I remember there was a couple of converters that were so highly recommended. Oh, this is it. You know, my mix never sounded better. And I got it. I was like, my mix sounds so like not like best it ever did, you know. And so I didn't use it. And why? I don't know. Who cares? Who cares? It doesn't sound good to me. That's all I care about. You know, and if it's $500 and it makes your mixes sound great, that's it. That's the one to go with. You know, nobody else is using it. Fine. Good. Nobody knows that you've got this little secret weapon. When you mix on a console, this is from Nick J. Do you always go back through the line amps? I run a Neve 8038 and I find myself mixing off the monitor section more than running them back through the 1064s and cleaner. Well, I'm not using a console anymore, but I did it the old traditional way. You know, I mean, I've always had the output of the desk going into a rack of EQs and a choice of different compressors. So, I mean, my sound is always already kind of going into the mastering stage per se. But I never did anything too tricky. There was a point where there was a possibility of my being able to switching out the line amps from the SSL to some old Neves, and I got this close to doing it, and I don't know, the tech left and I never did it, and I was like, it's just as well. But yeah, I never got too tricky with any of that. It's probably someone else would probably have a better option. Let's see. It seems like there's only one part of it. Was there an earlier part? But from Edu, it's That's why I was blown away when we've been together in Buenos Aires. I changed completely my mixing to regain a sacred mixing with passion and flame. Oh, right. So you're responding to what I'm saying. Yeah, exactly. You know, and here's the thing. I mean, I brought this up. Most of you are musicians, and um, why is it that when you're on stage and when you're performing, I could see you're a musician. You got your eyes closed, you're performing, you're not thinking per se, right? It's just streaming. You're just streaming and you're reacting to the music and you're reacting to those around you and your eyes are closed. And yet when you record and you're an accomplished engineer and you're an accomplished mixer and you're an accomplished musician, and yet you sit down and there isn't one iota of musicianship in you. I can watch you. You look like you're the dentist, you know, or you're a scientist and you're trying to discover some new chromosome, you know, and I'm like, what happened? Why are you focusing on this tiny little thing? Like, why are you just not performing? Why are you not closing your eyes and just doing what you do naturally on stage? Because the mix is just that, is just music. You can't control it. All you want to do is express it. And what the expression comes from inside you. So what is it that gets you to be so afraid and to be pontificating and thinking? Don't do that. Continue being the musician that you are. If you don't quite know your instrument yet, you don't know Pro Tools or Logic or you know, any of the others, then learn it to the point where you don't have to think about it anymore. But guys and gals, it's music, right? Perform. Just sit there and imagine that it's just another instrument and close your eyes and go for it. That's what's going to change you. And that's what they do saying, right? Saying that's why I was blown away when we've been together in Buenos Aires. It changed completely my mixing to regain the sacred mixing with passion and flame, because that's all it ever was. That's all it ever was. What do you think about the ATC 50s speaker? Well, I think that I have a pair, so I like them. Alone, no. I have subs. I've got Pro 12s. I've got 3 of them actually for the room. And for my room, one left, center, and right, it works perfectly. It's not like it's boom city in my room, right? But it just feels great. It's a really tight bottom end. I love the 50s along with a pair of subs. Now, the other ATCs that I love, and those are the ones I have here at the house, are the 25s. And I love my 25s. I don't have any subs with it. I don't have anything else. They're not quite as bright, but that's okay. Just keep that in mind, you know, so you can brighten up your track a little bit, but they feel wonderful. I love those. So I'm a big ATC fan. I've been through every speaker, you know, I mean, I've had, you know, my Pro X forever, but I don't have Pro X up here because I have to have an amp and speakers and another blah, 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 blah. I don't have, you know, I got the ATC, boom, plug them in, boom, go. So Karzog, that's it. Thank you very much. The Presto 41. It's great because since I don't remember anything, I've got you guys helping me. Karzog is the one that's got the Presto, and he's got like a synth warmer. It's really, really cool. And he's got, I don't know, a couple other ones. You should totally check them out. They're and the synth warmer I don't use just on synth. I'll use on anything I want to kind of warm up. But then the true iron on there, that's a really cool thing. You can use the saturation knob. He's got it called something else, which I'm sure somebody's going to tell me right away. It's a crush knob, but it's not really crushing. It's really cool. Definitely small company that you should check out, that guaranteed you'll be happy with. Which Benson plugin have you been using? Audio Ready or Pulsar? Uh-oh. Hey, Fernando. Fernando's here somewhere. You know what? I'm going to text him. Because again, I don't pay attention. I should. What Benson plugin is it? All right, we'll know that in a little bit. And that's got a lot more stuff than my Benson is. In fact, it's got too much right now. So I'm trying to work my way through just getting the simple stuff. And then I'm realizing how much bigger an engine it is and how much more I can do. Because, you got to start with what you know. You want to be able to emulate what works for you, what you can go to, and then you improve the picture. So already I'm like, wow, if I can get this Benson as grainy as mine, then I can see what else it can do. It's really there's a lot of potential with this plugin. Let's see, are pop rock producers tracking in 32-bit or is it mainly 24-bit word? I have no idea. The next pop rock producer that comes on there, that's a good question for them. Are you doing a one-day seminar? I probably will do a one-day seminar. You mean with the mix with the masters? I assume at some point I will. It's over loud. Echo Sun. That's the answer to the question of which Benson from Daniel. It is neither auditory or pulsar. It is over loud. Echo Sun. Totally cool plugin. Bad Monkey says, thank you. No more dentistry. You know what I mean? When I'm performing, I am listening first, then stuff comes out. Exactly. K-Clip. I think it was THD Gem. Well, we already figured that out. There it is. Overload. Ensign. In all years of experience in the music industry, where you see it heading now with all the tech and internet growing, especially since the lockdown? Well, that's a very good question, Christian. I see, people have been forced to be creative in a setting that they're not familiar with, right? We're all stuck at home. And those of you who have a home studio or didn't until 3 months ago when you built one in your, what used to be the kids' bedroom, and now they're all sleeping on the couch. Or in my case, I took hostage of the basement, and my son is a drummer, Eric, and so I still managed to keep the drums in there so he could play, and then I stuck all my stuff around it. We've learned to do a good job because there's no such thing for most of us. Like, well, I'm going to compromise now. It's not going to be as good, but you know what? It's better than nothing. I don't think so. As Larry David would say, I don't think so. It's got to be good. It's got to be great. It's got to be just as good as anywhere else. And so many of us have learned that. And many of us have like, wow, I could do this great. And so I think, where is this going? I think it's going to be going where, this is, let me put it this way. I invested in Zoom because I think that's the future. I think that the need to always be present is, you're going to find, look, I've been doing this for years and years and years, doing Nicecast and FaceTime. I mean, from the day Nicecast came out, now it's audio movers and stuff, but I got people who couldn't come to the studio or in England. I was doing this just like we are now, good 15 years ago. I think it's almost been that long. So I think there's just going to be a lot more of that. And I think so. Yeah. Obviously, the better the internet, the better the tech, the better Pro Tools or Logic, the better all this stuff, the more musical you can be, right? So I definitely see that heading in that direction. All right, let's see. Can you talk about what your lead vocal different compressor flavor workflow looks like currently, and any tips of what you listen for when blending them together? Okay. So what I did was, many of you know that my vocal sound comprises of a blend of different sounds that sound like, like a good head tone, a good throat, a good voice, some urgency and stuff. And they're just all there. It's not complicated. You take the time to find compressors that each accentuate that part of the voice. And then you start with one that you like, right? I've been starting with, I think it was a TLA that I like. And so I started with that one. Then I've got all these other ones that sound different. And they don't necessarily sound good on their own. They just sound good when they blend. And then you do the old like, no like, no like, no like. You just keep putting faders up. And then you bring one up and you go, oh man, those two kind of sound good together. Now what's missing in that? Can I get a little bit more urgency? Oh, where's my urgency compressor? Oh, the 1176 or the distressor that's crushed. Let me bring a little bit of that. Yeah, now the vocal's starting to, sing a little bit better. It's starting to feel exciting, right? Okay, and then what else? And then I've got 3 or 4 others. Oh, this one's interesting. I didn't expect that. That might be good on the chorus, or just it's a good blend. And that'll be my vocal sound. But it's very important to do one thing. You want to be sure that the signal you send to all the compressors all compress the same amount. Okay, so make sure first of all that they all, let's say, if you put the 1K up or something and you send it to all of them, they all, let's say, compress 1 dB together. And then if you add more level, they're going to compress 2 dB, right? Except for maybe the real crushers and stuff like that. And then there's no rule for that. Then let's make sure that the returns are coming back at the same level, so that if you bring them all at 0, they're all going to, as you turn one off and on the other, they each come back at the same level. They all, at least sonically, sound like in the place, because you don't want to have one that sounds like it's 30 dB hot and the other one you don't even hear because it's like minus 40, right? So get them to compress the same. And that way, as you're sending the vocal to all of them, you know that they're all doing the same amount of work. And they shouldn't be doing much work at all. It's about tone. It's not about compression, okay? And then, then you put all the faders down, and then, I have a starting point. There's been a point now where I keep liking this particular blend on different vocals. And so that's my starting point, but I have 3 or 4 others that are muted. And then I'll start, a song, and then I'll go, let's see. It takes what? 5 minutes? You're running the song down and you're just like turning on and off. And how do you tell what do you like? It's simple. You like it or you don't like it. That's all. It's that simple. Do you have a song that you consider your best mix? A best mix and a great song are one and the same to me, right? So I'd rather say, what's a great song, that was emotional. And if I go way, way, way back before any of you were born, it would have to be Luther Vandross, "A House Is Not a Home." That one feels just amazing. And Amy Mann, Lost in Space. Um, I'd say the Stones, Hear You Sigh. Definitely John Mayer. Oh, there's a few on there, Vultures or there's a few there, right? Any of the ballads, I'm really happy with that. Ride That Train. And yeah, I mean, Chris singing, Chris doing Yellow. That was really cool. So do I have one best? No, I have songs that make me feel a certain way. You Get What You Give, New Radicals. Oh man, I could still hear that song and I still feel good. It was such a positive go-getter. It was wonderful. Greg Alexander, genius. So, um, it keeps coming, and that's what I'm in it for. To get that very feeling, like, oh, what a song! What a great song! All right, let's see. So the parallel compressors, the 1176s, the EMI, and the boiler, even the Akai. Is this a similar calibration to the subgroups as far as a test tone return levels? Um, I I believe so. That's a Fernando question, but I'm pretty sure. Hey, Fernando, we're going to jump in on this and see. In the meantime, to have a successful career as a mixer, how important do you think is to have a manager or to focus on the business side in general when you're on the early stages of your career? No, no. And anyway, the whole role of management in the last few years, I think that whole role is changing to a degree. No, not in the beginning of your career. If you can have an accountant, at least go chase your money and um, and send the invoices. Just focus. When you get to the point where you're in such demand and you're losing gigs because nobody threw the hat in the ring, that in a sense you probably should have been doing yourself. Maybe you should be doing the networking. As a matter of fact, you should definitely be doing networking. you know you got to know the label people one on one. You got to go out with them and hang out, see where they're hanging out, or invite them out to lunch and get a relationship going and offer to mix some stuff for free just so that they see what you're about. All that early investments will pay off later. Don't worry about the money right now. Just do a great job every day. You can never ever do an average job. If it's going to be even close to average, go home. Don't cancel the session. Don't mix it. Come back later, but never do just something that's okay. When you automate the vocal going to the multi-compressor, do you automate the compressor return or the track feeding the compressor? I don't mess around with the returns. Remember, I'm mixing into the sweet spot, right? I'm mixing into it. And as I push into the compressors, things blossom and bloom and get bigger. So I'm not riding the returns. I'm riding post compression. I'm riding into the compressor. And that's what I'm automating. When you hear the sound of a finished mix and you get emotional from the sound and the song, can you describe this feeling and what triggers them? I would just like to know, how do you feel the sound? Well, that's something you're going to have to discover on your own. It's a bit like saying, well, how, when you meditate and you get to that point and you feel this enlightenment or you feel this amazing calm or happiness, how do you describe that? You just have to keep mixing until something like that happens. You know, there's a certain, if you're trying to have expectations in a sense, you may get disappointed. I think it's important to mix it for the sense of that you're just feeling better and better and you're understanding the song. Remember, the song, if it's not an instrumental, there's somebody singing it. What's the message? That's what's driving your mix, right? That's what's driving your message, is what is the story about? So, you know, and when it all comes together, for me, it's just this great, it's a great feeling. I don't know how to describe it any more than I just go, oh, that's it. And then, you know, I don't overthink it. I don't go home and wish I could have had another 10 hours to mix it. I'm done. Once my heart says I'm done, I'm done. The artist and, you know, the label want more changes, fine, bring it on. Let's make it a better mix, right? But I'm not going to suffer over that. Once I feel great, that's my cue. Print and send, P&S. Let's see, did Fernando get back to me? No, he didn't. So he's probably doing something else. Any tips for taking care of your ears while mixing and otherwise? Well, oh, here it goes. Before I answer that one, Fernando says, it's not such a specific calibration process as the subgroups. They're set up with the settings Michael likes, and we just make sure they compress and return evenly. So there you have it. Thank you, Fernando. What was that question? Oh, shoot, what was it? Oh, any tip, take care of your ears. What? Say what? Huh? I think you should, you know, I don't know. I've been doing it for a whole lot of years and I'm still mixing. My, you know, mastering doesn't re-EQ my mixes. So whatever's going on, I can still hear really well. And there are times when I was abusing him and times when I have, but I think you got to really look, you got to physically feel the song, right? So you're going to have to bring it up to a certain level and then bring it down. Bring it down. It doesn't have to be loud forever. And then take ear breaks. I mean, I almost always take ear breaks every 45 minutes for two reasons. One, because I want to take an ear break. Number two, I want to get away from it and come back and hear, you know, what have I just done? Because I'm my own sounding board. I mean, I can always call Fernando and say, Fernando, what do you think of this? But, you know, I'm on my own here. So, you know, when I take a little break, I can sit back down and I'll just go, oh, what was I thinking? You know, you can become objective a lot quicker. But I'm careful and there's not much more you can do. Just be aware of your hearing and do the best you can with it. You know, just don't, try not to abuse it. But I mean, you know, being in New York City, just getting from my apartment to the studio, I mean, there's an explosion of noises on the way, constant. You know, and the subways, I mean, there's always a barrage. I mean, do I say, well, wear earplugs from point A to point B? If that makes you feel better and you think that's going to keep your hearing clear and not dull it out, then do that. Do whatever you think feels good and don't worry about anybody else. But, you know, be smart about it. All right, let's see. Michael Seabrook. Michael, what a pleasure to see you again. I've been in France with you in 2016, the Ludovico, another guy from the Dolomites. Oh, yes. So great to hear you talking about philosophy of sound. Thank you. From Roman, I was wondering if you have any tips about the 2K, 4K range on the guitar, especially in the box? Well, I don't know how to answer that. I mean, what guitar? Depending on what song. Um, what if it's already bright? I mean, I don't, now you're asking a technical question void of music to me. So I'm always the wrong guy to answer that question. And anyway, I happened to figure out that it was a 4K number on certain rock guitars I use, because every time I turned something up all the way up, and then took the high pass. Is it high pass or the low pass? Oh yeah, I'm new to this. I'm a rookie. I take the top end off and and all the way to 4K, and then I bump up 4K, and I was like, woo, that sounds really cool. So I mean, but that's because that guitar needed it, so I don't know. From Pedro, hey Michael, good to see you again. I was with you at Petropolis. In Rio, of course. Just want to say my mixing skills improved 1,000, or is it 10,000? 10,000% after your master class. Well, I'm glad. 10,000. That's a pretty good number. Can you tell the Steel Wheels remix with Keith Richards using the sounds of New York City story? I don't remember that story. Who told you that story? I don't remember that. Jesse, you're gonna have to tell me that story, because that was all mixed in England, except when I redid I think I remixed Hear You Sigh for some 12-inch or something. I don't remember using New York City. Anyway, that was a long time ago. You'll probably remind me of that story, and then I'll go, oh yeah. Do you use Brauer Motion as a replacement for the Akai in the box? Yes, I do, because I'm not using the Akai, right? I'm up here. And that Akai setting in the left bottom corner that says drive, that is my Akai. That's the model of my Akai. So I use that static as my Akai return. That's Tony from 2011. Wasn't that the first year? Wasn't that the first year with a flood? The second seminar I ever did, and we had a massive flood. Unbelievable. And literally, I mean, the water was up about this high, and it started actually entering the studio, and but we got started on time. It never stopped us. But what a story. Have you ever thought what it would be like to try and mix like Al Schmidt or CLA or Chad Blake? I'm always amazed how radically different other people's systems are. No, but what I do is I think about these guys, right? Like if I'm mixing something and I'm thinking, oh man, I need to get that thing that Chad does, right? So I can either call Chad or I can kind of like, just start thinking about how maybe he would approach it. I do that a lot with Rich Costi too. If I'm mixing something and I'm like, oh boy, if Richie listened to this, he would call this really lame. What should I do? And they're like, all right, okay, Richie would do this. And I'm like, and then I slam it. And so I'll channel these guys, right? And it's my own interpretation of it because of how I love their style. Same with how Chris, or Al Schmidt. I mean, so it's important. I don't try to mix like them. I'm influenced by them, by the records they've done. I'm like, oh, you know what? This bridge really needs to have, that kind of Andy Wallace approach or something. And so then I put on my little Andy Wallace hat, which if Andy listened to, he probably would go, Brauer, that's so not me. But maybe it comes across just right. That's all I needed. So yeah, I channel these guys. I'm sure their ears are burning. Do you manipulate EQ plugins on the screen with a mouse or using your control surfaces? Both. I mean, I've got this great, in my main studio, I got the S6. I mean, there it is. If I'm going to pay money for a big ass control surface, I better use the buttons. I've got the S1, which feels great too. And with my S1, what I do is I have all my sends show up, right? So I do the sends. If I'm going to do any EQ or any other stuff like that, then I look to my right. I don't have my screen's never between my speakers. It's always to my right. All that's in between is the music. Well, I actually have another screen that is just a multi-bus. So nothing is going on there. It just shows my multi-bus compressors. I want to be able to see, instead of my having to turn back, which doesn't exist anymore, right? All right. I'm turning back and seeing a couch. I want to be able to see how my ABCD is working. And I have one compressor that represents the other 5 or 6 vocal compressors, because remember, if one is pushing a dB, I know all the other ones are pushing a dB. If it's pushing 3 dB, then I know all the other 3. So I have representations of all that, and it just sits there, and it's on, the screen is much darker. It's like a film monitoring or something. But otherwise, everything I do would be to my right, and I've got my little mouse, and I do my thing. So, haha, I own a Zakai. If anyone wants to run audio through it, really? Oh, that's right, I had 2, and I sold 1. So David, you have 1 of them. Good for you. $9,000 per stream. Hey, I want part of that. Robert, how do you count elements? To me, is bass, drums, vocals? No, elements. There's 2. That's a good question. There's support, and then there's the main element, the point of the song, right? What is, if you were in a little club and you only got yourself playing, what is each part of the song going to be? What are you going to focus on, right? So the elements, the drums and bass, quite often are simply support. So if you are focusing mostly on that, and you're not focusing enough on the element of what's the hook, what makes up the hook, and the vocal, and sometimes, listen to any Michael Jackson, listen to those hooks. I mean, there's 200 tracks in there, but you only notice 3. What are those 3? Those are the main elements. Those is what drives each section of the song. What are the 3 main elements in a verse or in a chorus? Go back and listen to any great record, and you'll see there's never more than 3 things coming at you. Those are the 3 elements I'm referring to. Are you still using the Pendulum ES8? Do you use a presets or make your own manual settings? Up until recently, yeah, the Pendulum ES8 is just a great compressor. I use that mostly across C with my guitars, and when it pushes just enough, it shimmers. And if you really want to know what my setting is, you just go to my site and look at all my gear, and you can just zoom in and you'll see exactly what that setting is. I never touch those. Once I find something good, I leave it alone. Your ABC bus are all of different ratio. I know you have calibration them, but when you push them hard, then the lowest ratio will always get louder than bus BC. Well, I'm not sending one thing to A, B, and C, right? I mean, if I'm sending something to A, I doubt I'd be wanting to use sending it to B or C. So they're calibrated in a way that each one of them, if I send a 1K tone, they're just doing 1 dB each. And whether I go through just the stereo, which would be E, for example, with no processing, if that's 1K, going through ABC is also going to be 1K. They're all balanced. There isn't like one that's 5 above the others. Seattle recording, do you see music delivery standards fully moving to loudness measurement normalization like has happened for TV, or is it just too fragmented to change at this point? You know, this is an ongoing battle that I don't know where this is going to go. You know, Spotify has decided that, you know, it has to be this kind of number. And the rest of us are like, are you kidding me? We're going to be mixing at, you know, +3 levels. Right. Like labels really want to hear that. There's just certain things that they're not organized. There's no one standard. And what labels want to hear, what the artist wants to hear, you just have to, it's a case by case situation. I don't know where this is going to go. It is fragmented. I don't know where it's going to go. And once somebody knows where it's going to go, somebody will tell me, you know. From Lee, so Wideners, what have you found useful in the box that works like SRS, Edison, R&D, and what the heck are you using to replace the ES8 and the Edward? What am I using to replace the ES8, Fernando? These are technical questions. Like, I was like, well, I don't know, it works. It works, so I'm good with that. I don't know, at some point, Fernando will pop up an answer. And then what Wideners, you know, it's interesting because one of my Wideners says Edison, but I don't think it is Edison. So I don't know what Fernando had set up, but it works. I think that's another Fernando question. You can see that technically I'm not very helpful. From Keith, hello, Mr. Brauer. I love your mix of the Magic by Joanne as Policewoman. Oh, wow. That was a while. Great drum sounds. Any memories of that mix? No, I'm sorry, but that was a cool song. How did you learn the business side of engineering? Oh, gee, by making a whole lot of mistakes repeatedly. I learned it from watching and listening to my manager, and yeah, you know, I mean, I highly recommend those of you who are still in school to take business courses. My father told me to do that. That, you know, if I didn't, I wouldn't be as self-sufficient and I'd be open to being ripped off, or, you know. Yeah, you know, I should have paid attention to that one. Definitely, if you can be taking small business courses, you've still have the opportunity, throw that in there. It's very, very important. I have a team of people. I have a business manager, you know, I have a manager, I have a lot of people that that I'm very much dependent on, but I've learned from them. But I would have been nice if I had learned a lot of that when I could, you know, in a school setting. And you don't even have to be in school. You can take these courses, you know, way after school. But I think everyone should really take the time to learn the business end of it. Otherwise, you will be abused and you will lose opportunities, financial opportunities. You'll be taken advantage of. So I highly recommend that you do that. Do you change anything in the final volume or compression of your mixes since music platforms? You know, I messing around. No, I'm still presenting my mix at at a certain level, and I give it to one of my mastering engineers, and it goes from there. And then we see, the labels don't want it at the level of Spotify or something else. They'll figure something out post. I'm presenting it so that it's competitive. That's what's important. And I know there's a whole war going on. I until somebody tells me different, I'm going to continue doing what people are asking, what the label and the artist is asking of me. Question from Marvin. Sorry here, a little late, but how long did it take for you to develop your voice or sound when you were starting? And also, is that sound the same since everything has gone digital? Yeah, it doesn't matter whether it went from analog to digital. It's what I feel in here. This is what I've been developing, how to express the song with who I am, what my personality is, without putting a stamp on it. I could do an emotional stamp, then you can tell who I am, but I try to stay away from having a sonic stamp, because then that becomes a little bit too much of yourself in it, so I try to do more of the emotional stamp on that. And when did that start? I think that started almost from the beginning, right from the beginning. I didn't know it. What do you know when you know nothing, right? You're just going for something, and I was going for wanting to feel like I'm on stage, I'm alive, that I'm playing live, that I'm performing. So that's what led to my mixes early on, feeling spontaneous, feeling alive, because that's exactly how I felt.
Hi, Michael. Sorry.
Hi.
If it's okay, we have time for a few more questions, if that's all right.
Okay.
Thank you.
So 3 more questions, guys and gals. What? Oh boy, these are the questions where you're supposed to sit at home and think about that first. What was the most valuable thing you've learned in your career? Well, I think what I've learned is never be too passionate about anything. You can put a lot of passion into what you're doing, but don't get hung up on it that because you were passionate, there's no room for listening to what the artist has to say. And that's what happened to me. I was so into what I was doing and feeling so good about it that when the artist wanted to make comments, this is a long time ago, mind you, I was not interested. And I was like, are you kidding me? This mix feels great to me. What can you say to improve it? Hello, it's not your song, buddy. All right. It's the artist's song. And I was too wrapped up in that. And that was a lesson that I had to learn, obviously the hard way. But most of these things you learn. How do you get better? How can you learn unless you make a mistake? Hopefully you get through it, you do learn, and then you improve and people notice, right? But that was, what I learned, it's not about you. You may be very much part of the ingredient, but you are not the end all. Your job is to bring out the vision of the artist. That's your job, okay? And if you think you're the artist, imagine what happens without that song. It's very quiet in the room without that song, right? You're just sitting there going, right? So you're not that important. What do you think makes people want to listen to online concerts in these times? What makes that format attractive? Can we mixers help with this? Well, somebody mixed it. So if you can tap into that, you should do it. I wasn't aware of this, but it makes total sense why people are, wanting to listen to online concerts because they want to get back into, they want to get away from the isolation in their little room. They want to feel like they're at a concert with people around them and enjoying themselves. I totally get that, and listening to music again, and in a live setting, even though it's a virtual live setting. I'll do two more questions. Right. An answer from David was, did he do a video on Mix with the Masters that went over the whole new setup that I missed? I did do a new video with a hybrid setup, which is, just about it. You're almost there. I've been working on ITB for a while. That's not ready to come out yet because I've been developing it. It was like 10 years before I even did my first tape op article about, the multi-bus approach. And then another, 14 years before I did what turned into the Brauer approach, with tape op. And then with Mix with the Masters, the last video is really more about my new hybrid approach. So it's like 90% there. It really is. The switch over between the ABCD hardware and plug-in, is really the only change. So in his new world, there's no outboard at all. I thought he was still fairly hybrid. Well, because of the pandemic, I'm sitting here. Can you imagine me trying to lug 5 huge 500-pound racks down a steep staircase? I'd be dead. You'd be talking about that idiot. He wanted to stay analog and it crushed him. No, I mean, there's always, if as long as my sound is always improving and getting bigger and more, just more dynamic, I don't care what the system is. Am I in the box right now? Yeah, I am in the box right now. Does anybody notice? No, I don't think anybody's going to notice. I'm having a great time, and if I go hybrid, but I'm enjoying it in the box right now. So, as long as people love the mixes I'm doing, they don't care how it's being delivered. Oh, Pablo, big hug from Miami Beach. All right, one more question. Oh, that's too quick. Was I involved in soft tooth germanium compressor? No, I wasn't. I just, offered a preset. Actually, I have a second preset that is closer to what I had. I think that's it. I think we're good here. Thank you, all of you, for joining in. And this was a lot of fun. Of course, it's a lot even more fun when I'm actually talking or seeing you guys in person, but this will do. This will good. Thank you very much, Victor and Maxime, for allowing this to be set up. I mean, this takes so much of their time, and offering it for free is incredibly kind. We all appreciate it, and it's great that we can continue with this despite all that's going on out there, which hopefully will settle down. We'll get back to business as usual. Although there will never be business as usual again. I think, before February and after December, life will never be the same, and it'll be better. I'm sure it'll be better. Anyway, everyone, thank you. See you later.
Thank you, Michael.